Hello, and welcome to the Lee Enochs Show, America's most controversial podcast. On today's episode, a major news story broke in the church community of the Southern Baptist Church. Lee Enochs has the story for us. Lee, tell me what's going on.
Hey, everybody, this is Lee Enochs, and thank you so much, Ryan. A lot of people may not know this, but I grew up in a Baptist faith community. The Baptist Church, in particular, the Southern Baptist Church, is a powerful force in my life. I go back as a very young child, probably elementary school, where I got invited to a Southern Baptist church, and it's always in the background, the influence of the Southern Baptist Church. And Southern Baptist Church, Ryan, is the largest evangelical and Protestant denomination in America. There's over 14 million Southern Baptists in America. Very influential denomination. In particular, for example, when Donald Trump was inaugurated, Robert Jeffers, the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas, a mega church of 14,000 members, gave the inaugural sermon at St. John's Church in Washington, D.C. He's really good friends with Donald Trump. And the Southern Baptist Church has played a major part in America's history. For example, Billy Graham, the famous evangelist who just passed away a few years ago, world famous evangelist, was a member for 55 years of First Baptist Church in Dallas, had his membership there. Although he traveled around the world, that was where his home church was. You cannot underemphasize the influence of the Southern Baptist Church in American politics, American religious life. And recently, probably the biggest controversy in the history, the 176-year history of the Southern Baptist Convention, broke this week. A guidepost solutions report on sexual abuse by clergy persons in the Southern Baptist Convention broke this Sunday. It's a 288 massive report that talks about how members of the leadership of the Southern Baptist Convention, the executive committee, basically maligned and stonewalled survivors of sexual abuse for 20 years in the Southern Baptist Convention. Over 700 people have come forward and said they've been sexually abused by pastors, by lay staff members in the Southern Baptist Convention. And this report that came out on Sunday, in great detail, covers the cover-up, goes over the cover-up, and it's still more and more information has come out. I have an op-ed coming out soon on this issue. I'm still doing a lot of research. I mean, besides my job, besides doing this podcast, I write for different newspapers, and I am covering this issue. It's a very heartbreaking thing for me, Ryan, because, this is my faith tradition. I know UNT Denton is a pretty secular place, but my faith is the most important thing. Everything that drives me comes from my faith. And last night, while I was thinking about this article, this op-ed that I've written, my mind raced back all the way back to my childhood of how I was connected to the Southern Baptist Church. And my great aunt, uncle, who both passed away 2 days apart, Ryan. They were in their 90s. One died on a Friday, and the other one died on a Monday in the same, a couple days later. They were faithful Baptists who read their King James Bible every morning at 6 a.m. They were up together reading their Bible for over 50 years. And they were faithful Christians. And that influence has impacted me. I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm the strongest Christian. In fact, I can't even say I'm a great representative of Christianity or Southern Baptist Convention, but it makes a difference to me and makes a difference to a multitude of people. But the scandal is something very real. And what's really hard about it, when you read this report, that when these people that had reported sexual abuse occurred to them, these leaders within the Southern Baptist Convention did not merely go to the police. They covered it up. They basically told these people that they should just keep it to themselves. They just try to protect their assets. And it's even come out that a former president of the Southern Baptist Convention was involved in sexual abuse himself. Somebody's come forward and said they were sexually abused, and that pastor used their position of power to basically abuse them for a long period of time. So this report's coming out. It's come out, and it's impacted the church greatly. In about 2 weeks, there is a massive Southern Baptist Convention. It meets annually in Anaheim, California. If I can get out there and interview some of these pastors, it's big. It's really hard to explain to a secular audience how big this is. So Christianity is still a major impact has a major impact on a lot of Americans, even though a lot of scholars and observers of religion in America say that we're in a secular era, a post-Christian era of American society. Christianity still plays a large role in many people's lives, especially here in the Bible Belt in the South. The Southern Baptist Church by far is the largest Protestant denomination in the United States. Like I said, of over 14 million people. The next largest, quote unquote, Christian denomination is the Roman Catholic Church. I think they have 70 million people. But the Southern Baptist Convention is very conservative, believes in traditional morality, and there are just literally thousands of individual Southern Baptist congregations in the United States. I think there's 47,000 independent, autonomous Southern Baptist churches in the United States today, and we're all connected through the Southern Baptist Convention. So this is a devastating report because these people who needed the support of the leadership at the highest echelon of the Southern Baptist Convention were turned away. They were maligned. Their integrity was impugned. And it's just a horrible situation. I cannot emphasize how horrible this is for people of faith in the Southern Baptist Convention. Think of all the victims. They say this has been going on for 20 years. There's been this massive cover-up. Well, recently something has come up that I need to talk about in this podcast, and that is concerning the Reverend Dr. Al Mohler Jr., who is the 9th president of the Southern Baptist Convention in Louisville, Kentucky. He is probably one of the most influential evangelicals in the world today. He has been the president of the Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, the flagship seminary, and I think it is the largest seminary in the world. And his hand is in everything in the Southern Baptist Convention. He and the broader evangelical world. And how this plays out in politics, because I usually just discuss politics, is they say that 80% of white evangelicals, which largely Southern Baptists are white evangelicals in the United States, voted for Donald Trump. I cannot emphasize enough of how influential the Southern Baptist Convention is in the Republican Party in the United States. Like I said, Robert Jeffers, who's got a massive television show, radio program, network, and is the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas, is a major Trump supporter. So this is a devastating thing, but we're going back to Dr. Al Mohler. Some people want to know what Dr. Mohler knew about this. And so today I've been on the phone with different people, different representatives for Dr. Mohler. And what they basically told me today is, one, that Al Mohler never served on the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention. He's mainly stayed as the president of Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and has been involved in different evangelical enterprises. Like he was the president last year of the Evangelical Theological Society. But other than that, he never served in a leadership capacity within the executive committee, which is very important because these are the people that knew about these sexual abuse incidents and didn't report it and maligned the survivors of the abuse. So the question that some people have is, what did Al Mohler know and when did he know it? Because he's such an influential figure within the Southern Baptist Convention, some people have asked that. Now, I have, to be honest with you, been super busy this week. I have only went over the report in a cursory manner. I need to find time this week to systematically read a over 300 page report. I've went over the bullet points. I looked at appendixes. I've read articles about it by Al Mohler, Russell Moore, different things that came out in Christianity Today, CNN, Dallas Morning News, a lot of reports. But this is what I can say right now about Dr. Al Mohler and regarding the sexual abuse scandal within the Southern Baptist Convention. One, Al Mohler did not serve in any time in the past on executive committee and was not privy to the information about the sexual abuse survivors. When something happened in his own school, he immediately took respond to this. Now, somebody asked me, did Al Mohler report it to the police? I do not know. But from what I understand, and I need to read the article, Ryan, he did everything by the book. And in this article, I've heard from different reports, different sources, different reporters, and from the document itself that he handled it appropriately and that he is pointed out as an example of how a person should handle a sexual abuse scandal. So I want to say today to the listening public out there and to different pastors and lay people within the Southern Baptist Convention, under no circumstance am I maligning the integrity of Al Mohler Jr. We have no reason to believe that he had knowledge of these heinous instances of sexual abuse and that he participated in covering this whole thing up, maligning survivors. He didn't have the apparatus of being able to do that at his disposal because he didn't serve in the leadership capacity within the executive committee. Now, having said that, why is this relevant? Well, because the leading figure, or one of the leading figures within the entire Southern Baptist Convention, who's been behind the appointment of several key leaders like Adam Greenway of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Well, actually, he left Southern Baptist Seminary as the head of one of the entities there to become the president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth. Al Mohler is behind his appointment, and several other key appointments across the United States were basically orchestrated by Dr. Al Mohler, or at least Mohler was influential in these figures leaving his seminary to become leaders in these respective schools and Southern Baptist entities. The question is, how did Al Mohler not know this? Well, evidently there's been all these sexual abuse survivors who came forward and reported this to the executive committee, and their stories were not told and didn't come out. But what the report does say is that the executive committee painstakingly developed a secret data file of over 700 sexual abuse survivors that they knew full well that these people had been abused, and they did not report it. They didn't do anything about it. They sat on it because they didn't want to pay out settlements to these different these different survivors. It's a heinous scandal, but I do not believe that Al Mohler had information that would impugn his integrity. Al Mohler personally helped me when I was a very young man. When I was very young, I went out to Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. He spent a couple hours with me, and he showed me he has a massive 150,000 private library. It is really difficult for me to even bring up his name in a podcast. I think he's a man of utmost integrity. I'm still on the story. I'm still getting out feelers of what's going on in the convention. But moving away from the Al Mohler situation, what I can say is this. One of the worst scandals in the history of American evangelicalism is taking place now, right now. It's a number of newspapers and magazines all across the country, and it's bad. Sexual abuse is occurring in a lot of churches across America. I've seen it actually occur in my own church, where pastors have had to step down because of sexual abuse. People come to a church, Ryan, to learn about Christ, strengthen their family, and they put their trust in these pastors and different lay leaders in the church, and some of them are being sexually abused. It's a heinous crime. It's a heinous situation. There needs to be cataclysmic reform. And I looked at the report enough to say this, that there has to be systematic change in American evangelicalism and the Southern Baptist Convention regarding sexual abuse survivors. Their stories have to be, if they're credible reports, need to be believed, and it needs to be dealt with appropriately. If there's anybody that's being abused in a church, the pastors immediately need to go to the police or whoever's in charge there, if this pastor's involved in it. Do not cover up the story. Go immediately to the police. And there has to be a reformation. And I'll close with this. In 1517, there was a young Roman Catholic priest named Martin Luther. He was a Augustinian monk in the Roman Catholic Church. He was a scholar. He had first initially been a lawyer, and he got caught up in a fire. It was a electrical storm where lightning and thunder was occurring all around him, and he cried out and said to God, if he would survive that storm, he'd become a monk, and he did. His dad was angry because his dad paid for his law school, Ryan, and so he goes in there, but he was a brilliant lawyer, and he used all that skill to become a master at Greek and Hebrew and became a scholar. Then one day, while reading the Epistle of Romans, he found a text that said that people are saved by grace, knowing this, that man is not justified by the works of law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. For by the works of law, no flesh shall be justified. And a cataclysmic thing occurred in his life in his prayer tower in a monastery in which he taught. It said, the just shall live by faith. And he cataclysmically helped reform the church of his day. And then one day he went to the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany, and he nailed 95 grievances or theses on a Wittenberg door. Grievances that he had against the church, abuses that were occurring in the Roman Catholic Church at that day, the existing church of that day. And he said that we've got away from the teaching of Christ and the apostles, and that men and women are justified by grace alone, through faith alone, in Jesus Christ alone, for the glory of God alone, based on the authority of Scripture alone. There's a lot of information there that needs to be unpacked, but we'll do that at a different time. Mostly this podcast is about politics and different current events. But what I do say, and why I brought that thing up about Martin Luther, is that his stand, historic and heroic stand for true, authentic Christianity was cataclysmic and brought about the Protestant Reformation that changed the entire Western world. There needs to be a fundamental change, a reformation in American evangelicalism, including the Southern Baptist Convention, in which this report has come out. There needs to be cataclysmic change, a reformation of historic proportions needs to take place. The Southern Baptist Church, which was predicated and founded and a split in I think it was 1845, initially supported slavery and was supportive of the South during the Civil War, had a long legacy, a dark legacy of slave owners and supporter of slavery, and discriminated against African Americans. When schools like Princeton Theological Seminary allowed African Americans to attend their school, Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, Southwestern Baptist Seminary, and other Southern Baptist schools did not allow African Americans to attend their school until the 50s and 1960s, Ryan. And there still is a legacy of shame and racism in certain elements of the Southern Baptist Convention. That needs to be dealt with. The treatment of women in the Southern Baptist Convention needs to be addressed. I am not a progressive. That's not a secret. I just came out with an article just a couple of days ago in my podcast, and I appreciate all the help you've had on getting that on the air. I'm one internet search away from being revealed as a pretty conservative, consistent conservative. And I don't support critical race theory. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't. I think the original source of it is Marxism, cultural Marxism. And that's not a secret. I mean, the initial propagators of critical race theory were Marxists. Does that mean that I throw out allegations of racism in American society? No. Racism is a heinous thing. I think it needs to be addressed, but I don't support critical race theory. That's a big issue in the Southern Baptist Convention. But there cannot be a bigger issue, at least over the last century, than this sexual abuse scandal in the Southern Baptist Convention. But today I want to just address, and we'll close with this, that there's a huge scandal going on in the Rome. I mean, I keep saying Roman Catholic Church, but the Southern Baptist Convention over sexual abuse survivors. It's heinous. It's bad. But I want to be clear that in no way am I impugning the integrity of Al Mohler, one of the leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention. Some people think it's hard to believe that he would not know what had occurred. But I want to say I just don't have enough evidence at this time. I want to wish everybody a good weekend out there. Have a great day, and God bless.